Hello, my name is Mr. Shed. In my first UBD, I was concerned with teaching a Georgia Performance Standard for 10th grade world history. The particular standard was concerned with medieval feudalism. My students were expected to analyze European medieval society with regard to culture, politics, society, religion, and economics. The main goal was that my students would be able to make connections between the events of the past and their future ramifications. For example, the events that would lead to medieval feudalism and the structure of the manorial system and feudalism in general would have a profound impact on modern capitalism as we know it, but it would also lead to such things as socialism and the extreme form of socialism, which is communism. As I mentioned previously, my main goal in this endeavor was that my students would be able to draw connections between events of the past and modern ramifications in the future. And according to Stephen Scotham, drawing such connections is important because it leads to patterns, relations, and generalizations of the mind, and you're able to build on previous experiences, and it will enable students to make sense of the world in new ways. For example, having a firm understanding of feudalism will help you in a political science class, for example, because you'll have a better understanding of the groundwork, the foundation of modern capitalism. And much the same way, as mentioned previously also, communism. You'll have a better understanding of what led to communism due to the historical groundwork of feudalism. I would have my students assigned in groups. They would be randomly assigned a social rank. For example, they may be assigned a noble rank, or a serf rank, or a merchant rank, or even a royal rank. And then the students would find the other person in the class with the same rank, and in groups they would do research for the class, and they would study the research material. And hopefully by the end of the research period they will have a greater understanding of feudalism, and they will be able to draw the aforementioned connections. In the second UBD, I was concerned with students showing evidence of learning. The students would be assigned to groups, as I previously mentioned, where they would conduct their own research. And at the end of the unit, a test would be administered, as well as a short response paper. I decided to have the students perform in a role-playing activity to ensure that the students were actively engaged in the material. It would furthermore showcase their knowledge and strengthen socialization skills. Student engagement is incredibly important in my classroom. Therefore, I felt that a role-playing activity would lead to greater engagement. Of course, you'll have students who won't want to participate or who may feel uncomfortable in the group in which they were randomly assigned. And in those instances, you want to work individually with the student. You want to find out what's causing the issue for the student, and if the situation calls for it, you may have to place the student in another group. But bottom line, the students have to perform in this role-playing activity. And according to Claire Keller, successful role-playing or simulation motivates students by employing disagreement, competition, or mystery in decision-making activities. And what she means by this is that as they perform in this role-playing activity, as they gather research together, and as you have opposing groups performing different skits, for example, you'll have the noblemen and then you'll have the serfs, they're going to be, one, rehearsing what they have already learned about themselves, about their social rank, yet at the same time, they're going to be learning new information about another social rank in the feudal era. And though they will have heard about the different details by me and like lecture time and in individual research, of course, it'll lead to a greater sense of understanding because one, you have different viewpoints coming together at the same time. In their own groups, they're going to be working together, formulating ideas, and hopefully retaining information which will be useful to them in the future. Now, UBD3 was primarily concerned with examining and reflecting upon the previous two UBDs. Why? It was important to do this because it would bring about new ideas for learning. In UBD 3, I discussed the key factors for teaching the unit material and reflected upon the use of technology by students. For example, in the classroom, students would most likely have access to either tablets or perhaps classroom computers. And if no classroom computers were available, there would of course be library computers, computer lab computers, etc. And at the same time, if I felt students were trustworthy in the classroom, I would allow them to use their smartphones as they compiled research. Though the majority of research would be done outside of class, um, I would still like to ensure that my students have access to the internet or to a tablet of some form. Um, and in order for the students to communicate with one another, of course, they may have phone numbers or they may communicate via Facebook or some other social media network. But I would encourage my students to create a wiki account. I would most likely create the wiki account for the students and create a class account. And in this way, students would be able to upload links to information they found useful or to write out what they had completed in terms of group research. And in that way, I would know if they were actually putting forth effort in the group and playing their part. Um, but the key issue that I examined in UBD 3 was differentiation among students. I was primarily concerned with differentiation because all students have different needs in a classroom. And as the teacher, you're faced with a difficult decision in regards to how you're going to format tests and how you're going to take care of assignments that may be due by students. Um, Perhaps there's a learning need by the student. Um, Perhaps the student does not feel that they are competent writers. Perhaps they feel more at ease when they are just saying the material to the teacher, just answering questions verbally. And at the same time, you have students who may not be as comfortable with tests. They may prefer to write a paper. Um, but at the same time, you have to remember that there needs to be uh, a test or some unit plan, some sort of assessment that will determine whether the unit material had accurately been learned by the students. And in my classroom, I settled on formatting a quiz that could be either written or taken verbally. And I also allowed for creativity in regards to extra credit for the unit. Now, when I say that, I mean these wouldn't necessarily be assigned by me uh, for an actual class grade. These would be things that may boost the points for those students who may feel as if they aren't as strong in test taking or in writing papers. Perhaps they want to showcase something else. Maybe they're more creative. And for these students, I would be very happy to accept additional work of a creative nature. For example, maybe a student decided to write a song about the feudal era, and perhaps they even wanted to perform it to the class. Um, that wouldn't necessarily be a large grade, but it could give them extra points, which would lead to a better grade. And it would also allow me to know that they do, in fact, know the material. It's just the way they present the material back to the teacher, because all students have different needs in that regard. And according to Seth Parsons, teachers who effectively differentiate their instruction not only carefully plan instruction to differentiate, but they also provide moment-by-moment adaptations to meet specific needs that become clear during instruction. And I took what he said to mean, as I am teaching, I'm going to be, well, throughout the semester, I will have already made opinions about the students and assess their various needs and their strengths and their weaknesses. But as I'm teaching the unit, I'm going to see who is struggling, who is not struggling, and I'm going to be prepared and formulating ideas about how I can help each student showcase their knowledge. If they're having difficulty learning, that may involve tutoring or additional outside of class support for the student. But ultimately, I just want to ensure that the students are learning and that they are comfortable playing back the information they have learned throughout the course. And I would definitely say differentiation would be the most important aspect of my third UBD.